Welcome to another episode of Parenting Great Kids. I'm Liz, your host, just for this episode. Today we're doing something a little different. Just as Dr. Meg answers questions from parents in her practice as a pediatrician, she'll be addressing your questions today in a special format we like to call Ask Dr. Meg. Now, before we get started, I want to invite you to send us your questions using the link in the show notes or by visiting us at meekerparenting.com. Today, Dr. Meg will answer questions on ADHD, helping your kids as they transition into adult life, and more. Meg, are you ready?
I sure am.
All right, let's get started. Our first question is from a concerned mom assisting her 25-year-old son in transitioning into adulthood. She writes, "Dear Dr. Meg, I'm the mom of a 25-year-old son who's really struggling to cope with life, work, his future, and everything he sees in the world today. I know I can't tell him what to do, but I need advice on how to get through to him."
Well, this is a great and unfortunately not an uncommon question. Helping a 25-year-old son navigate life is tricky. And here's why. He's an adult, a grown man. And you're right, you can't tell him what to do. You can support him and give him guidance, but you can aid him in making the right decisions. For instance, if he's 25, he should have a job. So if he doesn't have a job and he's living with you, you give him a month's warning and you say, you know what, I love having you here, but you need a job and you're no longer able to stay here in a month. And so that is what I mean by supporting him in making right decisions. He has to leave, he has to get a job. You do not want to enable him in any way. You don't want to be giving him money. You don't want to be doing his laundry. And you don't want to be cooking his meals unless he's sick or something like that. Very often, mothers with an adult son who is flailing in life feel sorry for their sons. And then they go in and they do things for them. This is one of the worst things you can do for your son. And here's why. A 25-year-old man needs to know that he's a man. He doesn't need to depend on his mother, and he can stand on his own 2 feet. That gives him security, a sense of independence, and value. So the first thing I would ask you to do is figure out what you may be doing to enable him to stay dependent on you. And then one by one, you need to pull back on those things and make him stand on his own. Even if that means living in a ratty old apartment or in a place that you don't like, it's important that he has his own place. As far as finding a job, that's his job to do, not yours. You can make suggestions, but that's all. That's as far as you go. This is painful, and I'm sensing from your question that this is a real emotional struggle for you because you want to fix your son and make sure he has a good life. You can't. All you can do is do your part, change what you can to make sure you're not enabling him to stay dependent on you. And as he starts to stand on his own 2 feet and flail, you need to stand back and let him do that. It's very much like watching a child ride a bike and fall off and ride a bike and fall off. You're tempted to want to put him back on the bike, but once he can get on the bike by himself, you have to let him go.
Our next question comes from a mom who says, "I'm a bit stressed about my kids and social media. They've had phones since they were 8, and now at 10 and 13, they're hooked on Instagram and TikTok. My husband and I keep telling them it's not safe, but they just won't listen. How do we pry them away from these devices that feel like they're glued to their hands?"
So you, like most parents, are having a hard time controlling your kids' social media use. I get it. I hear it all the time. First of all, social media is dangerous for kids, period. We have a lot of great research coming out that shows there's a direct correlation between depression and social media use in kids. Second of all, you tell me that you're trying to explain to your kids that it's not safe and they don't get it. They won't get it. They're 10 and 13. Their brains are not developed. So don't waste your breath. The phone is yours. You're paying the bills, and that means you're in charge of the phone. So they're not going to know it's safe, but you know it's safe. Instagram is one of the top two places where girls get sex trafficked. When kids are on social media, they are open to the entire world, including creepy people seeing them. As a matter of fact, the US now, because TikTok is controlled not by the US, but by China, is considering getting rid of it. This is very serious stuff. And this is not something that you want to play around with. Like, gee whiz, I just don't think we can get it away from them. Sure, you can. You own it. But I know that you don't want to just yank it from their hands. And I understand that. Your kids may be addicted. Okay. If you try to take a phone away from a 10 or 13-year-old and they scream at you, they're probably addicted. If they're using it more than 4 or 5 hours a day, they're addicted. And believe it or not, most kids are using it 5 or 6 hours a day. So here's what you do. First, don't try to convince them they need to get off. You sit down and you say with them, you know what? I've been doing some research and we are finding out that social media is really dangerous for you guys. We didn't know it when you were younger, but we know it now. That means we're going to change some habits around social media use, and I'm going to need your help. But this is something we have to do, and it's non-negotiable. Second thing you do is you come up with a plan on how to wean them off of social media. Now, you have two options. You can first cut them off cold turkey. You can buy a Gab phone, and you can even get them cheaper if you go to Gab phone and you use Meg as a code, they'll give you a discount on their phones. Or you can get a Gizmo phone, Gab or Gizmo. The thing that's terrific about these phones, and they have watches that look just like Apple Watches. Kids can text and call and play some games, but they can't get on the internet. A 10-year-old and a 13-year-old should not have access to the internet without your supervision. And by supervision, I mean you in the room, not you being able to read the social media a week later, because by then the damage may be done. The pressures that a 10 and 13-year-old feel through social media and bullies texting or posting on social media are very real and very dangerous. So you can get them one of the phones and cut them off cold turkey and say, now, as you get older, we're going to loosen some of the restrictions. The Gab phone at least has a plan where you can start adding social media time, internet time, according to what you want to do. And that's terrific. The second thing you could do is say, okay, our family is going to go on a social media or a screen diet. And this means that, and you pick the times, from 7 to 8 a.m. or 6 to 7 p.m. or whatever time you say, start with 3 hours a day. That everyone in this family is going to put their screen away. Or if they have homework to do, we're going to put our phones away and they're going to go here. So you find a spot in the kitchen where everyone, including you and dad, put their phone. You really can't ask your kids to do something you're not willing to do. It actually bothers kids more when their parents are on cell phones than it does parents when their kids are on cell phones. So you are doing your kids a huge favor by putting up your phone. So you start with 3 hours a day. You do it for a couple of weeks, then you go down to 2 hours a day, and then finally 1 hour a day. It's going to be hard, but you need to put on those restrictions. Thirdly, when you're pulling kids off of social media, you need to give them something fun to replace it, okay? You need to sign them up for swimming. You need to take them to the park. You need to get them reading a book. You need to get them playing a game together. Because here's what I've heard from kids over and over and over. When I got off social media and I started doing other things, I realized it was so much more fun to do anything other than be on social media. I don't think I want to go back to that. I just heard that Wednesday from a kid who was on social media 7 hours a day and was struggling with depression. Put her on this diet, and within 2 weeks, she started to feel so much better herself that she was motivated to keep it up. You can do it. You need to take charge. These devices are not glued to them, and they are not a part of them. This phone is yours, and you're in charge.
Thanks, Meg. All right. So, our next question comes from a parent who says, my son's teacher believes he should be evaluated for ADHD, but I've always seen him as an energetic kid, which I consider part of his personality. How do we distinguish between normal kid energy and ADHD? While his grades are okay, he struggles a little with emotional regulation. But doesn't every kid? Please help.
ADHD is a very common complaint. We call it complaint or concern whenever a parent comes in and wants to talk about their child. So it really kind of depends on the age of your child. And I don't see the age of your child now. I'm assuming he's in elementary school or maybe junior high. How do you differentiate normal, energetic kids from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? In boys, the hyperactivity disorder tends to trump the attention, though usually they have both issues with both the attention and the hyperactivity. An ADHD kid will act like this. They'll go to school, they'll sit at their desk, and they will start asking the teacher questions over and over. They will get up and sharpen their pencil over and over. They'll ask to go to the bathroom. They'll have a hard time sitting there and completing a task. They forget their homework, and they're constantly getting docked by the teacher because they're forgetting things. They also, when they're home, have difficulty following through with chores. Let's say you tell your child, go vacuum the living room and then put your clothes away in your bedroom. An ADHD child will probably get halfway through vacuuming the living room and get distracted by something, put the vacuum down, and go out and play and do nothing else because he really can't focus for longer than 5 or 10 minutes. The hyperactive child will be very hard to be around because they can't stop moving, they can't stop talking, even at dinner, even in the evening, often watching a movie. They have difficult time falling asleep at night. Your typical energetic boy will have a hard time sitting at a desk and coloring in the lines, but he won't interrupt the teacher over and over. He will raise his hand and he'll wait till the teacher calls on him and he'll ask the questions. Once recess bell rings, he is out the door and he is running and he is climbing trees. He might be picking fights with the kids, whatever very energetic boys do. He may hurt himself more. He may fall out of trees or break a bone. But the real difference between a highly energetic boy and a child with ADHD is that there will be big chunks of time during the day for an energetic child to quiet down, to be able to do two chores at a time, to be able to sit and listen, to be able to remember bringing their homework back to school consistently. The ADHD child just won't be able to do that. ADHD is not hard to diagnose. If you suspect it, take your child to the doctor, and they will ask you to fill out many forms, and they'll ask their teachers to fill out forms. And as we score those forms, we can pretty clearly evaluate whether it's just an energetic, strong-willed child or a child with genuine ADHD.
All right, Meg. Our next question touches on the dynamics of co-parenting and the challenge of encouraging increased involvement from one parent without causing resentment. This listener writes, our 3 kids range from 8 to 15, and I've kind of taken the lead with our kids for years. How do I encourage my husband to be more involved in parenting our kids without sounding like I'm criticizing him? I'm worried it might be too late for him to step into our parenting in a more engaged way.
Well, it's a terrific question, but If your husband wants to be engaged with the kids, and it sounds like he does, it's never too late for him or you as a dad or mom to be more engaged with your kids. And certainly at your kids' ages, they are not too old because a 35-year-old with a good dad wants to be more engaged. So, as far as opening up opportunities to encourage their father to move in and engage them more, rather than tell him, you need to really engage with the kids more because they really need it, you state it in a very different way. You say something like, you know what? I have seen the kids act so happy and be so much calmer after they've been with you. I know that they love being with you and they may not ask, but you need to know they always want to be with you. And they may not come to you and say, Dad, let's do this or Dad, let's do that. But I know that if you continually ask them to do things, they will respond, maybe immediately or maybe in the future. Then you give him specific ideas or activities to do with the kids. Because a lot of dads will go, okay, but I don't know what an 8-year-old or a 15-year-old wants to do. And you can say, here's what I've seen they really like to do. If he just says, well, all I know how to do is play golf on the weekends, he can invite him to play golf, and that's fine. If they don't like golf, they're probably not going to want to do it. What you want to do is identify what each of your kids likes to do. Maybe one of your kids likes to go outside and play basketball. Maybe one of your kids likes to go to movies. Maybe another kid likes to go to the park and, play on the swing sets or whatever. Identify what that child likes to do and then tell your husband, I know that Johnny loves going out and playing basketball, and I really think that he would love having you out there playing with him. You could always give that a try. So you need to offer things that the kids like to do that he could step into. You also want to say it in a way where he feels good about doing things with the kids, like the kids love it when you're there. You don't want to make him feel guilty. And finally, when there are times in the parenting or in situations where kids are asking for help, don't step in. Encourage them to go ask their dad. Even if you know a better answer than dad, it doesn't matter. Always find opportunities where you can back out and their father can come and take in. Because if you're used to doing everything with the kids and running the show, that's your default. You're just going to do things over and over, answer the questions, set the table or make the food or whatever. Open up opportunities for your husband or their father to do it. And over time, I guarantee the kids will feel more comfortable engaging him. He'll feel more uncomfortable engaging the kids, and it can build on itself. But again, you need to foster it and give momentum to it by offering very specific suggestions that he could do with the kids and suggestions for the kids to depend on their dad to answer questions or solve problems.
All right, it looks like we have time for one more question. And this is from another mom. And she writes, I want to learn and educate myself on how to raise sisters. Our girls are 28 months apart, and I have been very conscious of how I talk and treat them individually and together. I have dysfunctional relationships with my own sisters, and I don't want that for my girls. I understand they both have different personalities and will have their own likes and dislikes, but I want to find tools on how to lay a solid foundation or framework of sisterhood and friendship.
Having two daughters a little over 2 years apart can be tricky, but you can raise them to be close and to be really good kids. Now, you say you have a dysfunctional relationship with your sisters. I would encourage you to look back at your relationship with them and find two or three places where there was profound dysfunction and label them. For instance, we would never talk to one another. We fought all the time. We said mean things to each other. Because if you don't look back and see the mistakes that you made with your sisters, you will repeat it or encourage your daughters to repeat it. It's just a subconscious thing. So when you find out what happened with you and your sisters, we used to yell at each other. We called each other's names. That's one of the behaviors that you want to curb in your daughters. So if you see your daughters arguing or calling names, you step in and you say, this isn't allowed. And if you do this to one another, here are the consequences. You can't just react maybe the way your mother did. You can raise daughters who are very different to be very close as they get older. So it's important as they get older to acknowledge their different personalities and praise their different personalities, praise their different character qualities, not just the different things they can do. Well, I know you're really great at soccer and your sister's really great at ballet, and it's wonderful you're different. And that's okay. But talk about different character qualities they each have and praise those character qualities in front of the other sister and do it equally. So you praise a character quality in one in front of sister two, and then you praise a character quality in sister two in front of sister one. And this will start to help them see one another in a positive light. Wow, she really is patient, or wow, she really is courageous. I saw what she did. The second thing you want to do is encourage them to do activities where they need one another. For instance, get them to work on a project that goes much better when two people are working on it, where they're doing something together and they don't compete. Board games are terrific, but there's always a winner and a loser. And there's usually one person who wins all the time. So you don't want to set them up for that. But find an activity that you can engage them in. And maybe you need to engage with them in it, where it's an activity that they can't do unless the other helps them. That's a great way to do it. Talk positively about sisterhood. Talk about the fact that they're so lucky that they have one another, and that as they get older, the best part about being sisters is they can be one another's best friends as they grow up. They are the person that when one is hurting in school, the other sister comes along and always is an encouragement. So they are the one that may always have the back of the other, whereas a friend may not have that. So when you encourage them in those ways, and you don't want to overdo it, you don't want to do it every day, praise them about a different thing. But if you follow those few steps, you will find that over the years, they will grow closer to one another and they won't end up being like you and your sisters. And finally, they're not your sisters and they're not you. And so don't treat them like your sisters treated you, and don't expect them to behave like you behaved with your sisters. This is a separate sisterhood than you had with your sisters. So treat it like a fresh, new sisterhood.
Thank you so much, Meg. And thank you, listeners, for continuing to send in your fantastic questions. I love hearing these Ask Dr. Meg podcasts. Thank you so much for having me on for today's episode, Meg. And I'm sure our listeners are looking forward to hearing your next one next month.
If you'd like to contribute to future discussions by sending in your questions, simply click the link provided in your show notes or visit us at meekerparenting.com. And while you're there, don't miss out on the plethora of resources available to support you on your parenting adventure. Until next time, please remember that great kids are raised, not born.